Hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar of the Impact of Agritech Beyond Singapore, organized by Altius. Hope all of you are having a great third week of 2022, and we hope that the best is yet to come. So my name is Kejing. I shall be your host for this webinar. Let's go on to the webinar timeline. I see a couple of people are still starting to stream in. Those who are here, it's good to see there's some familiar names here. Hello everyone. So this shall be a 1-hour webinar. We're touching on 3 key topics by the guest speakers, followed by a fireside chat. So for the fireside chat, there will be questions, very interesting questions with regards to the kind of opportunities that you are able to see in ASEAN for the agri-tech sphere. Are all indoor farms being created the same? And of course, last but not least, what is the importance of tech in agri-tech? And of course, there's always a Q&A at the end of the webinar. Feel free at any time to type in your questions at the Q&A bar right onto your right on your right top toolbox bar. So before further ado, allow me to introduce some of our guest speakers, our 3 guest speakers. First off, we've got Mr. Lee Eng Kiat. Eng Kiat is actually Executive Director of the Foreign Direct Investment Advisory of UOB, something of a micro-influencer himself, judging on the LinkedIn reactions posts that I see. Of course, he's a veteran in the webinar sphere, anything regarding food, sustainability, and of course, agri-tech. Eng Kiat, how are you?
Great, very glad to be here and look forward to interacting with the audience.
Right. Likewise, I look forward to hearing your speech, or rather your presentation later on. Next, we also have Miss Cecilia Khoo. Cecilia, she's a General Manager of Delta Electronics Singapore, and of course, her company was featured last year in local media, where they are going to build a container smart farm in Punggol Digital District. Cecilia, looking good, yeah?
Thank you.
Great. Looking forward to your presentation. Yeah. Okay, last but not least, for the attendees, you might notice that you're missing one handsome fella, Mr. Anu. He's actually the head of advisory and business development here in Altius Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, in times like this, he is COVID positive, but no worries. He's not in the office. He's actually in Europe. He's fine. He's recovering. So I shall be your presenter for the slides. So we'll not without any further delay, allow me to start the presentation on my end. Yeah, so through the list, I've seen there are actually some attendees here who are from the investor, the VC's firm, and also a couple of startups. So I thought it'd be good to share with you what are the insights for the agri-tech startups in the region, what are the opportunities beyond Singapore, and of course, the overseas go-to-market strategy. First of all, I mean, the definitions of agri-tech is very, very fluid. I'll do a very, I would say, preliminary definition if possible. As the industry grows, there'll always be pocket of spaces that new entrants will wish to come in. So as with other industries, we could easily identify the industries into upstream, the downstream, and hybrid. The interesting ones are usually the upstream players who dabbles in the sustainability business and are seeing the most interest from investors. Singapore or ASEAN is seeing a flurry of new and interesting players in the bioenergy, farm management, and robotics. Novel farming systems have also started to sprout out from co-innovation partners between overseas and local players. The downstream players, such as the restaurant tech, has also seen many investments and collaboration opportunities between scientists and traditional manufacturing firms. So here, I mean, is a growth projection. I mean, farming has been around for thousands of years, but investments and startup activity in agricultural tech has exploded over the past 5 years. As you can see, in 2019, it exploded from 12.7 billion to 21 billion in 2024. So IoT has accelerated the investment in farming tech and expected to reach 21 billion. The AI market itself will be expected to reach 2.9 billion in 2025, supported by the advancements of coding. These are some of the players in the agri-tech landscape map. I should not be going through everyone, but I would like to point out that there are a couple of interesting companies. We call them the mini-cons and the sunicorns. So the mini-cons are actually the high-growth early-stage ventures, I would say about the Series A+. Watch out for the companies as they take the business to the next level by scaling up for the accelerated growth. The Sunicorns, which we call the soon-to-be unicorns, are the handful of highly valued startups which have successfully grown out to attract the valuations of over 100 million. So unicorns with the valuation exceeding the billion-dollar mark and even multi-billion-dollar mark will represent the top agri-tech startups globally. So in terms of ASEAN annual financings from 2014 to 2020, Singapore actually led the ASEAN region in fundraising with 177 million funding for agri-tech startups very specifically. Number of startups per country for ASEAN, there were about 175 active agri-tech startups. And I would say the most of it are actually located in Indonesia, which I'll be sharing a bit more on what are the opportunities in Indonesia shortly. So there are, I would say, a breakdown of category, which you see the most common will be under the e-commerce marketplace, followed very closely by urban farming. So allow me to share with you what are the opportunities in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Australia. Indonesia agri-tech industry actually takes up 1/3 of the land and the labor force. However, even though they are one of the world's largest agricultural producer, it is struggling to produce enough food to feed its 260 million people. So local farming has actually witnessed years of slow decline as poor yields and falling income drive more and more people to abandon the land. So they're able to feed its 280 people in 2030, I would say inhabitants. Agricultural productivity will have to increase by 60%. However, Indonesia is also the second largest food wastage in the world, where they waste about 50 to 70% harvested crops, or maybe about 300 kilograms per person. So what are the challenges and opportunities you can expect in the Indonesia agri-tech sphere? I would say not. I mean, in terms of challenges, the technology sphere, only 30% of farmers, they use internet. So in terms of tech adoption, is not that high. However, I would say the opportunity would be there will be a lot of reduction of post-harvest losses, of course, better storage of crops. And there are a lot of, I would say, sustainability technology innovation where they help to convert the food waste to energy. So the investors in Indonesia side are actually both local and global, which actually corresponded to the previous slides that we have shared. In Indonesia, some of the prominent names are as follows: East Ventures, UMG, Alpha, JWC. So about Vietnam agri-tech, so they have about one of the highest growth rate, 90% of the agriculture. They export closely about 41.2 billion, and of course the 90% of their I would say enterprise are small and super small, with a capital of less than 430K. So you see about mostly the smaller players would be in Vietnam. The challenges in Vietnam will be, of course, the labor productivity, considering the current COVID situation. A lot of workers, or rather lack of workers, will be the main issue over there. There are a lot of unequal access to safe food, water, and of course dietary. This will actually correspond to kind of food safety that I would say ASEAN is very much going towards in the terms of direction. In terms of opportunities, Vietnam is, I would say, very open. Our government is increasingly wanting to invest a lot more in smart farming in terms of, I would say, farm management. I see a couple of attendees here are also vendors in terms of this space. So that might be interesting for you to explore. Robotics, machinery, and equipment are also, I mean, they are used to automate farm work. There's a lot of opportunities available in both the north and south of Vietnam. Yeah, this is just one example of how Ho Chi Minh is actually trying to promote high-tech use in agricultural co-ops. So last but not least, allow me to share a bit more on the Australian agri-tech industry. I mean, Australia is super duper huge. Half of the food is actually exported, and of course, their farm income actually surpassed 60 billion, despite the, of course, the trade tensions with China. But however, there will be some price increase, so they're expected to pay a bit more for meat-wise. Challenges for Australia, I mean, in terms of labor, access, connectivity, but also depends on where they actually are. Of course, for agri-tech solution that exists, not a lot of farmers are actually adopting it. There are a lot, I would say, the most common questions that, or rather incentives they're looking out for will be by the government-funded adoption and extension services. However, there are a lot of opportunity to develop, of course, a core supply chain. Potentially, they could unlock the value in the agricultural side. They're also showing a lot of ways, same as in Indonesia as well. So companies who are able to convert or ready to sustain these goals of waste into energy or into proper fertilizers would see a lot of opportunities in Australia and down under. So how can actually LTOs help in this overseas? How do you go to market? We have three main services. We do the corporate secretarial, corporate finance, and of course management consultancy. In terms of management consultancy, we help you to find out exactly who are the players you could talk to, who are the players you should be talking to, or to give you a long list of an idea exactly how you should approach it. And after that, if you do wish to set up, we do have our corporate secretarial team and corporate finance team to see how well to support you in that part of the world. So we've been around for 30 years. These are the kind of numbers you can expect in terms of kind of companies we have helped. Industry-wise, I would say Agritech is one of the booming ones that we help. We have seen a lot of traction since 2020, actually, where a lot of interest from the European side who are looking to this part of the world, and of course a lot of Asia side who are looking to Europe for technology, I would say innovation, collaboration opportunities. We have 32 offices in 22 countries. So I would say if you have any queries or any, I would say, industry knowledge you wish to know, feel free to contact us, feel free to contact me. And yeah, this is actually our ecosystem. For Singapore companies, you might be aware that actually government grants that you could use. I'd like to, of course, to share with you that we are also appointed as an in-market consultant for Enterprise Singapore in Australia. So feel free to let us know if you need any assistance in applying for it. And yeah, this is actually the end of my presentation. I hope you have a good idea of exactly where and what to go and what to do. So I should pass on to my next speaker, and get over to you.
Thanks, KJ. Appreciate the comprehensive overview. And just let me go a bit into the overall trends for the agri-food sector, and why there is a very important, impetus for change that needs to come because of the environmental sustainability considerations that we need to run through. If you don't mind, KJ, go to the next two slides. Just skip the next one. Yeah, that's right. Now, if you think about Asia, the population is going to increase, and the income levels are also going to increase per capita. This will translate itself to a doubling in the overall spending of food. In terms of the kind of food that they will eat, there's a Givaldo executive that talked about how proteins consumption will increase by 70%. How is the world, with its current stretched supply chains and production chains and its overall sustainability considerations, able to feed this growing population? And this population is largely in Asia. It's going to be one of those key considerations that I think the world is going to face in the upcoming years ahead. So it's not only, and we have just gone through COVID, and we have ourselves experienced how food supply chains was really a concern into a place like Singapore. But if you think about it, when the ports are closed, when gateways are closed, food security to cities itself, be it Indonesia, like Jakarta or KL, etc., all could be potential concerns. And so there's the overall consideration that food needs to be produced closer to urban centers itself. I jokingly talk about how sometimes when it rains out in Malaysia, especially around the Chinese New Year period, actually the vegetable prices in Singapore actually escalates by easily 30–40%. That's amidst already the food inflation that we are seeing. And I remember back in the days when New York had a significant storm, New York City itself, the port was closed. And the food trying to get into New York City was significantly hindered. Shelves were empty. And if I think about that, previous slide please, KJ. Those are some of the challenges that we need to think about from a food security standpoint. Now, the other two challenges that I think cities and also the world will face in order to feed this growing population is the whole topic about food safety. If you think about the E. coli crisis for lettuce out in the US, many of the fast food chain QSRs are thinking about going to indoor farming and more controlled environment agriculture, precisely because of the outbursts, or so-called the trends in terms of E. coli exposures in some of the salads that appeared in some of the restaurants. And this whole food safety issue is not unique to just that example in the US itself. In Asia, it is very much a key issue. And I won't bother to belabor the point, but we do want to know where our sources of food are coming from, and the safety of the food, and the freshness of the food. And I've already alluded to the last point on sustainability, and I think what I would just add on is, if we want to feed the amount of animal protein to the emerging and growing markets in China, as well as India, as well as Southeast Asia, you need a whole new Amazon. The amount of agriculture produced in the Amazon, in Brazil itself, in order to produce that kind of a level of food. And I don't think that is sustainable. So therefore, there is a huge impulsion or compulsion for us to significantly innovate to produce the food that is necessary as well as desired by Asia's growing middle income. Next slide, please, KJ. Thank you very much. So with that in mind, all is not lost. I've painted the story as a start as a bit of a bleak picture. I hope you don't get depressed by that. But I think the future is bright, because you have innovators like Delta, innovators like some of our companies that we work with, constantly looking into this and seeing this not as a challenge, but really as an opportunity. I think the overall Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, as well as the digital translation, really brings about whole new opportunities to transform not only food production supply chains, but the overall agri-food value chain itself. And I think that's the overall opportunity that we see, that with things like controlled environmental agriculture, recirculatory aquaculture systems, actually a salmon could be produced in a place like Switzerland, where it's not close to seawater at all. And that's where potentially you can see food systems and production being brought closer to urban cities itself. And this for places like Singapore, for the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, in Abu Dhabi, for example, will be key considerations. And we see growth in those markets. For food safety, I think the affordability of sensors, as well as the emergence of sensors, has really allowed us to do better traceability. Blockchain itself forms that overall ability to trace and then authenticate that indeed this food was sourced from certain locations as well. Last but not least, in terms of sustainability, we're looking at different kinds of feed ingredients. So I give you an example. Overall, globally, the amount of fish that you can, traditionally you feed fish with fish. So fish meal is a common source of fish, but overall wild catch for fish has already plateaued. So we need to think about new supplies of feed for fish itself. Some of this has actually gone to soy, plant-based, but some of that has gone to insect meal. And I think these supplementary sources of protein then allows us to grow aquaculture as a sector itself to address the protein requirements of Asia. And if I think about it, aquaculture is actually a much more efficient protein source, because the feed conversion ratio for aquaculture is 1.2, perhaps at worst 1.3. Compare this to beef, which is about 6.7, swine, which is about 3.3, and chicken, which is about 1.7. I think it's much more efficient if there can be considerations regarding using aquaculture and the feed that goes into aquaculture itself as one of the means to address the protein demands out in Asia itself. So I would just point on the last point on food waste. There is much to be said regarding how circular economy concepts can really be much better thought through in order to take perhaps food that is not so ideal or not so pretty and inject it and distribute it in such a way, or produce it into other products that contributes or reduces the amount of food waste, and then reduces therefore the carbon footprint in terms of the food production that goes into food production, and therefore enable us as well to be much more sustainable in the overall food production space under the overall consideration of sustainability. So I hope that in this very brief, discussion or sharing, you kind of get a sense that then the technology is there to really drive the change. Now, the next step I think that the agri-food industry is going through is really market expansion, as well as commercializing the scale up. And let me then go to the next slide that talks a bit about how that besides just innovating in key cities, in places like California, in the Netherlands, in Boston area, in places like Singapore, or even Hong Kong, in Australia as well, really the next step is about scaling up. Solutions and technologies, finding the markets, and perhaps the financing solutions as well, in order to reach out to better markets itself. And I think one of the observations that we've seen in the whole agri-food innovation sector is the interest in then expanding out into Southeast Asia itself. But we all know that Southeast Asia is not a uniform market. It has various challenges. The ease of doing business varies quite significantly. And some of the most attractive markets are sometimes a bit more challenging to go into, places like Indonesia and Vietnam, as highlighted by KJ itself. So 10 years ago, UOB therefore set up what we call an FDI advisory unit. And the team was essentially a group of people, and leveraging on the fact that UOB has an extensive network in Southeast Asia, how can we then advise companies not only on financial services, but really be a business partner to come alongside you to help you understand the market opportunities in especially Southeast Asia, to understand the regulatory requirements of how to register a company even, and who might be some of the service providers like Altios to help you with your strategy, and then the lawyers and the corporate service providers to help you with the fundamental registration of the company down there. And so that's where we have embarked upon this journey, set up this unit 10 years ago in order to support you on your market expansion in ASEAN, helping global companies tap agri-food opportunities in ASEAN. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, these are some of the companies and examples that we're partnered hand in hand. And Ever's new name is actually Calera. They were founded in Hamburg, and they have a farm out in Kuwait. And they have a huge interest in Singapore as a market. So I worked with them in order to help them understand the Singapore landscape. And based on that, they needed various requirements in terms of understanding and finding real estate partners, and also understanding the lay of the landscape in the government considerations in the awarding of grants, as well as undertaking operations in Singapore. And that's where we worked hand in hand with them to eventually see them set up here. And you've seen the various announcements. They do R&D here, and they will also open up one of the largest agriculture or indoor farm in Singapore itself out in the east. But I will leave Calera and Ever to talk about their expansion plans later on. Next slide, please, KJ. This is another example coming out from Indonesia. Now, Green Rebel is actually has its roots in the plant-based restaurant business, but they realized that the product space was also a scalable business for them to go into. So you can find their products actually in Starbucks out in Indonesia. And they wanted to then expand out from Indonesia into places like Singapore as well as Malaysia. And that's where I worked closely with Helga in order to help her understand the market out in Malaysia, help her connect to a few parties out in Malaysia itself, in order to get her started in identifying potential distribution partners that can help her distribute and target the Malaysia market as well. So I hope this gives you a sense of how UOB extends itself in a beyond banking approach. Even before financial services is considered, we want to help you understand and then go into the markets itself. And then thereafter, you can hopefully see us as a strong business partner. And that's where the financial services will come in hand to help you grow your business in ASEAN. Next slide, please. So I can't go away without talking about financing solutions. And frankly speaking, financing is really a key consideration in the scaling up of a lot of the agri-food innovations. And I would say for much of the financing requirements right now that I see for many of the agri-food innovations right now, they actually are much better positioned for, I guess, venture capital funding, if not venture debt. And that's where in many of my conversations, I actually start off with talking to them to say, should I introduce you to UOB Venture Management as well as Innovent, which is a joint venture between UOB and Temasek, in order to offer venture debt solutions to companies. But beyond that, as companies scale up, what UOB has found is that companies want frameworks in order to help them adhere to green financing or energy transition financing capabilities as well as standards. And we have therefore worked with various industries. And if I think about the agri-food sector, the most relevant ones will be more perhaps the Green Circular Economy Framework, as well as the Green and Sustainable Trade Financing Framework to support companies in the agri-food space on the sustainability journey as well. And these are typically debt-related solutions that offer both a standards for you to adhere to, and it's recognized by certain standards, so you can consider it green or energy transition financing. And then by securing the loans and the debt for these solutions, then you know that you are fulfilling both the sustainability aspects, but also the financing requirements for your project. All this is very theoretical. Why don't I go into the next slide to then talk about some of the companies that we've helped on this sustainability journey. So some of you have probably heard, it already came out in the news several years back. This is the Singapore Poultry Hub. They use modern agri-tech technologies, things like robotics, sensors, and automation in order to enable and increase the capacity in the facility by 70% and the productivity by 26%, essentially through the use of some of these automation solutions. And it is in that then we can provide the financing solutions in order to support that growth and the adoption of some of these technology. I think it was also a great innovation on their part to manage their waste management system so that it reduces the amount of waste generated by the poultry processes. Separately, in Malaysia, you have the Boom Group. And for the Boom Group itself, they buy and sell as a traditional business in the poultry sector, but their business in terms of collections and payments was still fairly cash-based. And then we worked with them, therefore, to implement a cash management solution and a cash handling solution in order to bring and make it a lot more productive and easier in terms of cash management. And that's their way and our way of working with some of the traditional agri-food players in order to digitalize as well as adapt to the new technology and solutions out there. Last slide, please, KJ. Just wanted to share that these are just some of the examples that we have highlighted and shared with you how UOB comes alongside and supports agri-food in their journey. We'll be happy to have a conversation. Some of the you can go to the website in order for ASEAN Insights, especially to catch up on the latest trends and some of that will be agri-food related. So with that, I hope you found it insightful, and I'm glad to be able to discuss further, perhaps in the Q&A as well as the fireside chat. Maybe back to KJ or Cecilia, who's going to be the next speaker. Thanks.
Thank
you. Yeah, Cecilia, over to you.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide? Or the next? Sorry. Let me introduce Delta a little bit. Delta is a Taiwanese listed company. We are the world leader in switching power supplies and the thermal management. So the sales revenue is around $9.6 billion in 2020, and Delta has already embarked on sustainability very long ago. So we were selected as one of the first Asian company to be in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index from 2011 until today. And we were awarded by CDP last year for our significant contribution for water conservation and climate change, and also helping the supply chain embarking on their sustainability efforts. This year we joined RE100, so the whole Delta group commit to be carbon neutral by 2030. So the whole Delta, we engage in 3 sectors. The first one is power electronics. It's our largest one, and being the largest switching power supply, we actually offer the most efficient power supply components and product solutions in the market. And being the manufacturer of electronics components, we adopted automation or I 4.0 very, very early as well. And every single factory under Delta Group has I 4.0 KPIs. So in the middle, you will see automation is also our main focus of business. So under the automation sector, we do industrial automation. Being a manufacturer, of course, industrial automation it counts naturally. And we also expanded to building automation because it goes hand in hand with industrial automation. Then the last one is infrastructure. So in infrastructure, we have a data center, EV charging station, and other display solutions. So in Delta, because we embarked on green initiative very, very early, since 2006, we have 28 green buildings / factories and 2 certified green data center until today. So next slide, please. So this slide actually shows our evolution of our smart farming solutions. just like what I said, because we are the manufacturer in so many different domains. So in 2011, our chairman actually went to UN and heard about the the climate change and the food shortage appeal by the UN. So he came back inspired and committed that the whole Delta, maybe since we have so many different solutions and products that we manufactured, so can we actually put everything together, and we have experts from different domains and work together to see whether we can actually build something to help the agriculture industry. So from 2011 to 2014, it's basically just trying to put everything together, trying to optimize the efficiency and cost reduction. But that's not enough, because simply having the solution, simply having the technology alone, it doesn't really produce good quality vegetables. So then Delta actually engaged several plant scientists. So the plant scientists actually work with our solution engineers to focus on the quality, the texture of the vegetable, and how do we actually bring the natural environment and mimic them in our indoor vertical farm environment. So then the vegetables will feel like they are still in the natural environment when they grow. Okay, so then by doing this, we can ensure the quality and the nutrients produced from the indoor farm is as good as the veggie that's grown in the natural environment. So that's from 2015 and 2016. And after we have already done the solution and we optimize and we actually improve on the quality of the vegetable, we try to commercialize it, because from our own experiences being a manufacturer, we know that some companies or some startups or farmers, they have very, very good idea, but they don't actually have a partner for them to mass produce, to scale up. So then we dedicated ourselves to see whether we can actually have a fully automated but scalable solutions. So everything is modularized. So when the farmers, when they started, they can actually build a very small PLC and gradually scale up the business and up to whatever they are comfortable with. Okay, so that was the focus from 2017 to 2019. So after all that, we actually believe that we are ready for the plug and play solutions. And during those periods, 10 years periods, we actually developed 26 different types of vegetables in our database. So the farmers or investors, they even though they don't know how to grow the vegetables, they can actually use our growth parameters embedded in our systems to grow the vegetable. And we also guarantee quality and quantity of the vegetable that is from our solutions. And our solutions today can scale up to 5 tons a day, so and 6 months deployments. So this is just show you how we do it step by step and learn from experiences. So then we can actually do a scale up solution and plug and play. Next slides, please. So this is a lot of people actually asked me, for the indoor farm, especially indoor vertical farm, because we use LED lights, right, to mimic the sunlight. LED light actually consume a lot of energy, right? So can we actually reduce the energy consumptions? And is there any other ways that we can reduce the energy consumptions? So in Delta, we actually experiment, changing the distance of the light with the plants and actually measure the energy consumptions. And also we experimented, using the traditional, the light tube, the LED traditional light tube, and having a one-plated LED light source embedded in the plate, the LED plate we call it. So we actually experiment on both solutions and compare whether, you know, just doing the you know, the height change and also the LED light design change, how much it will save on the energy consumptions. And based on our experiments, we can actually save around 56% of energy consumption. So it's actually very significant, especially if you look at, you know, most of the indoor farming energy, LED lighting is the majority energy consumptions, components in it. So by minimizing the light and heat loss, we can actually achieve, you know, reducing the energy consumptions for indoor farming. Can we go to the next slide? So on the left-hand side, this is how we actually track, you know, the capital expenditure that we spend. You know, the traditional LED light tubes, it can be very, very cheap, depending on where you get it from. Some of the China manufacturer, they have a very scale up model, so their lights can be very, very economical for the farmers to set up the vertical farm. And we experimented using the LED light tube and our plated embedded light source, and we tried various you know, the light source, and we also track the capital expenditure for having different solutions, and we track for 5 years, because, you know, most of the LED lights, you will see we have to do a lot of you know, replacement in 1 or 2 years or 3 years, and their efficiency actually dropped quite significantly. So after, if you only look at the first year, it doesn't really mean anything. But then if you actually track for 3 years, 5 years, then you will actually see a huge gap in the energy expense that you actually pay throughout these years. So we track, you know, the capital expenditure and the energy expenses that we pay, and we actually see, you know, by having the plated embedded light source LED lights, it will actually eventually through time, it will actually save the energy bills for the farm. And also on the right hand side, we also experimented, you know, having the specific light spectrums for their specific vegetables. Why? Because if we can do that with our LED lights, right, we can shorten their growth cycle. Once we can shorten their growth cycle, then of course we increase our capacity and we increase our output, then we will get a better ROI. And I think farmers will love to hear that, because everything is about ROI. So these are some of the examples that we actually experimented within Delta to see whether we can actually help the farming or agriculture industry by reducing some of the challenging questions like energy consumptions and the growth cycle. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we also in Delta, because we are a manufacturer, so we try to experiment on circular economy. I think everyone is talking about circular economy, and Ankit also talked about, you know, food waste. Kajin at the beginning also talked about, you know, in Indonesia, Australia, that we also see a lot of food waste. So for us, even though it is a manufacturing, we actually experimented in our Dongguan manufacturing plants. We see whether we can actually recycle and reuse most of our electronic waste or packaging material, whether we can actually recycle all of that. So we actually we've been able to achieve 100% of waste diversions, and with 4% of our waste recovery. So and being validated by UL. So this is quite encouraging because, we heard about, circular economy so much, but every time we don't know how to start. And our experience from the manufacturing plant is, if we can talk to some of the suppliers to start with, and having different connections, connect us with whatever they know, whoever they may be interested with the waste, then we can all work together and see and achieve a 100% diversion. Can we go to the next slides? This is another example of circular economy. We just experimented in 2020. We used the PCB waste and tried to manufacture the building material. And so the PCB waste is really good for the the waterproofing solution for building material. So we use that for in the future we will use that for fish pond covering because its weatherability is very good, and we can also use that for hazardous warehouse exterior wall. So we just started on that, and hopefully we can also see a success for this pilot project and get validation by UL or other certification companies as well. So this is just two examples about circular economy. And for the aquaculture, for the vertical farm industry, we also want to try to see whether we can do circular economy. So today, if any audience today they want to try to see whether we can work together, collaborate together to achieve circular economy, please come and talk to us and see whether we can work out something and build a closed loop circular economy for the aquaculture industry. Next slides, please. So this is so much we hear everyone talk about, the climate change. We have volcano eruptions lately. We have snow, the drastic climate interruptions. We have droughts. We have floods everywhere. If we just look at food security, if you are just a traditional farm, then you'll be severely impacted by the natural disaster. Your whole years of labor will go wasted just because of the climate, right? So that's why we believe that for food security purposes, we should invest at least a certain percentage of your productions to a indoor vertical farm, so then you can still secure a bit of your income source to avoid some of the challenges that we see from climate change. Labor shortage, we heard about labor. I think because of COVID, we are experiencing labor challenge quite a lot. In terms of logistics, in terms of raw material, everything. And we hear so many stories about, there are so many farms, they couldn't find any workers to harvest. So their fruits, their crops just have to go unwasted and can't do anything. So this is just a shame. So I think, for labor shortage, automation, that there's so much automation technology that we can actually try and use. So hopefully we can, one day we can deal with the labor shortage for the aquaculture industry, in the very near future. Green initiative, indoor farming. I think most of the audience may know that indoor farming will only use like 3% or 5% of the water usage compared to the traditional farm. And if we actually have vertical indoor farming for the community, not like the traditional way where we actually grow or farm aquaculture produce in certain location and distribute it globally. When we distribute it globally, aeroplanes, shipping, the land transport, they all have, the carbon emissions, right? So if we have, micro community indoor farm to supply the community, then we can get away all of this CO2 emissions from the logistic supply chain. Then I think this is another green initiative. So of course, if we can, of course, today there are so many technologies out there. There's so many new ideas, new initiatives out there. So I think the whole industry, because this is such a young industry. So if all of us can work together, and UOB, if UOB is willing to give us, funding for all the different initiatives, then I think, then we can see the resilience of the whole industry. And once the industry actually grow together, this will become a popular industry. Then everyone will jump in. When everyone jump in, we seek scales. Once we have scales, then the cost should go down. When the cost goes down, I think the farmer will have an easier life to have a better ROI. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is why in my last slides, I based on the previous slides that I had, I just couldn't stress more on food security. I do believe every single country, every single farmers, they should have around 10 to 20% of their capacity produced from the indoor farm, just because they can secure a portion of their income stream not impacted by any of the climate change, right? So then their livelihood can continue, their business can continue, even though we see so many drastic climate changes in the world. The second appeal that we want to see is automation. I really do believe that every single farm should try to adopt some of the automation solutions just to deal with the labor shortage, and some of the automation challenge, the productivity, the ROI challenges going forward. So this is our two appeals, and we also believe, in order for us to have a sustainable business model, we have to balance the technology. You can have the best technology, but they cost too much. Then the farmer cannot afford it. Once the farmer cannot afford it, I think, they will not be able to adopt. And we also have to consider the food security, food safety, the market acceptance of, whatever we grow, right? And also we have to look at the farmer's ROI together with, green initiatives, sustainability, the circular economy, all in all, then we can have a greener and sustainable business model for the indoor farm society. So this is my last slide. Thank you. Thank you, Keijin.
All right, thank you all. I think it's doesn't happen often, but I guess all of you remain until the fireside chat. I do understand it's just 10 minutes remaining. I hope this is worth your while. So without further ado, let me jump to the first question. What other countries do you think in ASEAN that may present the greatest opportunities in 2022? Maybe I'll start with India.
Thanks, KJ. I think it's great to hear that you have already covered Indonesia and Vietnam. Especially if I think about Agritech, particularly for companies that are rolling out more sensors and even better productivity in the farms itself, not just the traditional farms itself. I think that's a great market potential. We hear the other sector that is important, and I think for aquaculture is the other key growth. And we've seen the likes of TaniHub as well as e-fishery really come forward and really seen that growth as well as adoption. And so I think I'm very excited about Indonesia from a traditional farming and the agri-tech sector. For Vietnam, the view I feel is a bit different. I feel that the animal protein sector is a huge growth market out in Vietnam. And what you have out there is maybe different kinds of proteins. And Tobel, for example, for insect farming, insect meal is actually growing quite well out in Vietnam. The whole understanding of the use of farming technologies to enhance disease management protecting against things like, for example, African swine flu. I think these are some of the technologies, or at least opportunities, that I see in Vietnam itself. But let me just close off with one market that you have not mentioned, which is Thailand. And for Thailand, I just want to shift a bit to say about the plant-based protein sectors. If you think about the traditional strengths of Thailand, it's really a food production hub. And they, like many other countries all around the region as well, are beginning to realize the huge potential and the environmental sustainability considerations in consuming more plant-based protein as opposed to animal protein. And I think that's why we've seen different modalities as well as types of plant-based proteins emerge in Thailand itself. And I think that has good potential to scale as well because of their traditional strengths in exporting food to the rest of the world. Okay, let me maybe ask Cecilia now for her opinion regarding which are my countries. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the countries you have already mentioned, you know, like US, we have seen aggressive adoption of indoor farming for vegetables, for lettuce and everything, just because of the you know, the alkali danger last time. For some of the Middle East countries as well, that's naturally you know, a choice for them. We also see, you know, automation, a lot of aggressive automation adoptions in China, and some interest from Thailand, you just mentioned. Indonesia, we do see a huge growth in their aquaculture. You know, the indoor automated aquaculture industry. So I think Indonesia is definitely a country that we should pay attention to. And personally, I do believe that Australia should be one of the countries that we can explore. Even though Australia, the land is so huge, but the usable land is really not that huge. And with the environment there is good for a very green, you know, indoor farming. And hopefully, you know, we can actually try to experiment some of the other, you know, protein produced using the solar panel or totally off-grid solutions in Australia.
Thanks, Cecilia, and thanks, Ankit. I think when you touch about the plant-based, there is a question. Maybe before I just jump straight to it, what do you think about cell-based agriculture for food production, where Singapore is quite all right and quite good already?
Should I start?
Yeah, sure. Ankit, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sure. I think it's still early phases. I want to think about the regulatory hurdles. Singapore is the only country right now that's actually approved cellular proteins for human consumption. And that's based upon the back of Singapore Food Agency's very strong and robust, I guess, evaluation of the so-called the risk as well as the safety aspects of cellular proteins. But I think the rest of the world, we're keeping an close eye on Israel as well as the US, which I think will be the other two key markets that will look into and consider approving cellular proteins for human consumption as well. I think China has a bit more of a wait and see approach. I think the regulatory authorities down there has not given a clearer indication. So that perhaps is also some of these considerations when it comes out to Asia. Now, so regulatory approval, that's going to be one of those key hindrances or promoters for the industry, depending on when we see regulatory approval come in. The other area really is the area of the costs and the scale up. I think the processes for manufacturing cellular proteins are still very nascent. And I think it's very encouraging, like for someone like Moza, to talk about replacing the serums, you know, in terms of from the typical bovine serums into other sources of serums, which has less ethical, but also is less costly. And I think that whole area of R&D, scale up and cost down production that Cecilia has mentioned a bit, I think it's still very early stages for cellular proteins itself. But that being said, think about who is interested and who is open to investing. I think with Just, they have talked about a plant out in the Middle East. And I think some of the Middle East countries are really looking into how to secure their food security considerations, and therefore are in some ways supporting the growth of the sector through fairly significant investments itself. So that's my take in terms of regulatory as well as cost. I think it will take some time before it hits mass adoption. Meanwhile, we'll see, I think, plant-based proteins play its role in Asia, especially in terms of protein consumption. And then I think aquaculture is the other sector that I will watch in terms of a viable short to mid-term, I guess, consideration of viability. KJ?
Yep, thank you. Cecilia, anything to...
I think what Anki said is very correct. And I think we should actually use the Singapore success and try to make it a role model for other countries. So then the R&D, if we can actually try to use whatever we have already in Singapore, right, and try to see whether we can use the technology, whether we can use the if we can work together and do a scaled up model or a modular model, then we can use whatever is available bit by bit. Then we sell it to different countries and try out if their regulatory bodies allow the products to be imported or to be sold in their market. But the most important is really, in order for us to have a better business model, I still believe that this is the right time for us to do R&D, to try out the technology, to reduce the cost and see whether it can be modular, it can be scaled up in the future.
Thanks, Cecilia. Thanks, Anki. I think we've got the comment on the chat. It says that cellular protein production may be driven by access to renewable energy. Also, the guy, Derek Stewart from Hutton, is saying the production of growth factors is still a bottleneck. However, they are working on it. So I guess either of you got a partner to work with. Okay, I know there's time machine. Allow me to move on to the next question, if that is fine, by Ankit and Cecilia. Okay, let me just go on. Yeah. So how important is the tech in Agritech? So I guess we've seen a lot of, I would say, Industry 4.0, and now the World Government Summit, as you say, there's Agriculture 4.0. So I'd like to hear what our thoughts. Maybe I will start with Inget first.
Thanks, KJ. I think tech is going to be a key enabler and a driver. Now, however, I want to be a bit careful and take a bit more of a cautionary tone, because I think tech must be a human-centric technology. Because if the tech is good, but the adoption is difficult, then it is really hard to scale it up. So I think that what I would say is that tech is going to drive, because we cannot produce the same amount of food with the same amount of resources, the same way it is done in the past. So therefore, tech is going to enable that. But the additional tonality down there I'll put is the human-centric consideration. The other consideration that I will add in then is the scale up. So can these technologies, I mean, if we talked about cellular proteins and indoor farming, if players like Delta do not look into the energy efficiency aspects, and if players do not think about a systems approach, like for example, the energy for indoor farming should come or could come from renewable sources, that ecosystem approach will lend itself to better scalability and achieving the sustainability considerations in the overall agri-tech sector as well. So let me just use those two as just my initial thoughts about tech in agri-tech itself.
Good. Cecilia?
I think, yeah, I think naturally from Delta, we believe technology is very important. But I think there still have to be a balance, because technology, there's too many technologies out there. And what is good for you may be different for, other farmers, right? So then it is very easy for us to lost in, all of these different solutions, and we try this solution and that solutions. And sometimes we want to pick the best solutions at the start. Actually, from my experiences, when we just starting out, I think we need to pick the technology that is good for now. And once you run it a bit, then you will understand which technology is most important for you. So it must have, and then nice to have, right? And once you have the must have, and I believe your must have maybe I believe in most of the industry for agriculture or for aquaculture, the common must-have, we should be able to spot the common must-have. Once you have all the common must-have, then I think Delta will be so much willing to produce something like a common solution for all of the farmers, and we can drive down the cost for the farmers. So for us to actually work on that, there's just a lot of collaborations. We can work with different partners on sensors. We can work with partners on the automation solutions or IoT solutions or package solutions. All of that. Once we all collaborate together and test it out, and then we can find that commonality. Once we find that commonality, then if we can mass produce the solution, it will drive down the cost. Then in the same time, if we can partner with some of the the renewable energy solution providers, then we can actually test to see how much of the renewable energy can be supplied to the indoor farm. And utilize some of the tracking platforms to track how we can actually reduce it and how much we can reduce. Whether can the farm be off-grid solutions or super low energy solution. So with all of the different players, with the data that we collected, if we can share with everyone, if everyone is willing to share, then I think the industry has immense opportunity to grow and to drive down the cost, and then you can see a much more solutions out there for people to choose.
Well, I mean, on that note, I think it's fair enough to say the vendors in this webinar, I think there's a call for collaboration there. And of course, for the management consultancy, there's also a call for human-centric approach by INCAT. So these are very good, I would say, actions that you may take. Understand that the webinar is ending. So, I mean, we have a couple of questions still. Nevertheless, we will still be sending you a poll. Feel free to any additional questions you have in the poll. And on that note, I'd like to thank my speakers, of course, all the attendees. I will leave some of the emails of our speakers over here. Please take them down if you want to take a screenshot, or feel free to drop me an email, or feel free to drop Anu, NCAT, or Cecilia email anytime. We'll be more than happy to have a chat with you if you're here in Singapore, even if you're overseas as well. So yeah, on that note, thank you very much again for all of you attendees, and of course to our guest speakers, NCAT and Cecilia. And yeah, any other things? If not, I think it will be a wrap. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, KJ. Thanks, Cecilia. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.